Hello and welcome along to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. We are back with big news in the Sky Bet Championship. And that, lads, is that Neil Harris and assistant David Livermore have been taken out of their roles at Cardiff City with immediate effect. Now, we'll talk about the fan reaction to this. We'll talk about your reaction to it and Cardiff's season so far, as well as Neil Harris's tenure. And of course, as always, what we think for the future, because me and Craig are probably going to have a few questions to answer for in this one. But let's start with Charlie this time, because we haven't for a little while. So Charlie, I guess the main news with Neil Harris leaving, it was a dream start to him when he joined partway through last year. He took them up into the top six from mid-table. They got into the playoffs. They, of course, ran close in that. But this season, it's not quite been the same. 29 points from 24 games, languishing in 15th place. I know we don't like to see managers go, but I guess you can kind of understand it, can't you?
Yeah, and I think the recent run as well definitely hasn't helped. I mean, they've had some tougher games. You do look across the last 6 defeats. I know, like Norwich, obviously the week before. However, I think this weekend was probably the final straw for them. Do you know what it is? Well, I'll go on to it a bit later on. But the sort of style of football Cardiff play, I think it's effective. But then you need to have a plan B, and I think they probably got found out a bit. You know, last year it worked for him. Obviously, got him high up the league. When they're quite direct like that, it can be, once you've been worked out, easy to defend against. And it just felt like they didn't really have a plan B. I mean, they've been a bit unlucky. You know, they were mourning in the game against Norwich and then got a man sent off as well. But you can't be unlucky 6 times in a row. And like you say, I think just given the stature of the club, I know we've mentioned this in almost every episode now, but the expectation of Cardiff, 15th is probably not good enough in the Championship, especially given maybe the like you say, how they did last year. So for me, it's not a surprise. Like you say, don't like anyone losing their job. However, I can't say it's been the biggest shock that we've of these managerial specials that we've done.
Completely agree. And coming over to you, Craig, I guess the frustration is Charlie mentions the recent run of defeats, but just prior to that, they'd won a few games quite heavily. And we talked on the prediction shows about them potentially coming into form now. They've got some good players at the club, some of whom, like Harry Wilson, have been in the Premier League last year and been effective. It's got to be quite frustrating as a Cardiff fan to see a team go from that sort of promise to deflating and losing every week so quickly.
Yeah, they've been a mixed bag all season, to be honest. I'm just looking at their results, in and out. And then they went on that run, winning 4 straight games, beating Luton 4-0 and Huddersfield 3-0. Watford away, that's a very good result, because Watford, I think they've only lost 1 all season at home.
Yeah.
And then to do it to Stoke as well, obviously they snuffed Stoke out. You think, oh, right, they're back in it, they're going to be up there in the playoffs. But then after that, the Derby game against Swansea has killed them. But even though they bounced back quite well, the 6 straight defeats have been absolutely horrific. And yeah, all right, you can look at the games in those defeats, as Charlie said. Obviously, yeah, you played Norwich twice, that's not ideal. But also you played Brentford. There's games in there you got to beat Queen's Park Rangers at home, but Wickham as well. Wickham haven't won many games this season. So as you say, players, they've got some really good players. Like you said, Harry Wilson obviously done very well with Derby a few seasons ago. Yeah, another player, obviously Kiefer Moore, obviously the top goal scorer at the moment, 8 goals. Yeah, he's a good target man, but they don't have anything else. They've only scored 30 goals all season in the league. And what I think the problem is when your centre back is probably the 3rd top goal scorer, that does worry me. And obviously the home form's still not great. They conceded 18 goals at home. That's very worrying.
Charlie, coming back to you, Craig mentions probably the lack of goals that they would expect going forward, but also at the back, they've let in 28 goals, which is un-Cardiff-like, and based on the second half of last season, un-Neil Harris-like.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, he was very good at grinding out a win last year, very much sort of 1-0, 2-1, that kind of thing, like you say, and kept a fairly tight ship at the back. But I take Huddersfield as an example. You can outscore teams at home and get away with it, but you have to be firing at the other end, and Cardiff aren't really doing that at either end. I suppose the positive for Cardiff fans is he's probably, whoever comes in, or whatever happens now, is they've got 10 days to potentially do some work in that area. But you are starting to then get down the road of having to overpay players to get them to come last minute, or, you know, clubs, you're basically over a barrel a little bit, aren't you? You know, if you do try and make a bid for a player. So whoever comes in is going to have to be quite, you know, wily with that. And I don't know what Cardiff's plan is. Have they got someone else lined up? I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute, but that really affects the type of recruitment. And they do need to recruit. I think, like you say, they've got some good players, but for whatever reason, I think they're still missing a little bit. They're missing that offensive sort of leader at the back, like you say, to organise it. I think it's an organisational issue as opposed to a talent issue. But yeah, I'm sure the recruitment part of it will be a tough question for whoever comes in.
And Craig, coming back to you, obviously, we've got a bit to answer for, because we both had Cardiff finishing the playoffs this year in our pre-season predictions. I think plenty of others did as well. and you would be well within your right to have done so based on the end of last season. And Vincent Tan, almost in his statement, was almost apologetic, which we haven't seen from him before, because he recognised the good run that Neil Harris had been on prior to this. But how has it gone so wrong so quickly? Because Neil Harris at Cardiff, it seemed like a match made in heaven, certainly post-lockdown last season.
Yeah, I think they kind of played a similar way to what Neil Warnock done, and Neil Warnock done a fantastic job there, got them back in the Premier League. All right, the season in the Premier League didn't go as well, but they were close, and then obviously there were off the field problems as well. When you go on a football on a bad run, you try and change everything to get that result, try and get that win, try everything. It just hasn't been working, unfortunately, for Neil Harris. And don't get us wrong, like Neil Harris done a fantastic job last season. I think for a club that just recently got relegated, I think the expectation is probably high. Yeah, you expect them to be up there, and that's why I think me and you probably picked them to be up there in the top 6 again. I wouldn't pick them to go up, but I wouldn't put them in the top 6. But yeah, it's going to horribly run. But I think this championship season has been quite weird anyway, because I think there's teams that I think we probably would expect to be nearer to the bottom are quite high up, and that's obviously not a disrespect to Luton and Barnsley, for example. They're doing very well. Obviously, Barnsley in the top half, Luton's just around the table. Don't expect teams like Nottingham Forest and Derby and Cardiff, to be fair, to be down near the bottom. So it's been a very mixed season.
And let's move back to Charlie, and we'll get towards your favourite bit. And there's a very good reason I'm starting with you here, because we've got to talk about a bit of positivity for the fans, who might be coming in next, what we might have to look forward to with Cardiff. And I know you always throw the same name out for every job because you're eager for him to be in work, but he's only second in the running this time, Paul Cook, because top of the permanent manager leaderboard in the odds is one Mick McCarthy, who just left Applewell. So, Charlie, looking at the top 4, I know a lot of Cardiff fans are concerned about the names in 3 and 4, which are Pulis and Hughes, I guess because of a preconception of the style of football, and they're there for every job. But Mick McCarthy, number 1, Paul Cook, number 2, the likes of Eddie Howe and Craig Bellamy not far behind, actually. Who do you think is going to be the next manager? Who do you think it should be? And what are your thoughts of the front runners early on?
No, I've got to say, just on number 3 in terms of Tony Pulis, just hear me out on this. I'm not saying he should be the manager. However, I do believe he would have been higher up that list had he not taken the Sheffield Wednesday job. Because I'm not going to, we've done a whole episode on that, don't be wrong. But, Sheffield Wednesday were probably more technical side, less physical, and that's not really Tony Pulis. Let's not beat around the bush. I would argue the opposite with Cardiff here. Very, physical side, rely on a direct style of play, probably better suited to Pulis. The problem is I think now his reputation has been a little bit, not tarnished, that's too strong a word. He's done a lot in the game, but it's knocked him further down that list. I mean, Mick McCarthy, you know what you're getting with him. I think it would be a good appointment. I think he's very upfront, he's honest, and I think that's probably what you want as a fan. What I will say is it's not going to revolutionise overnight under him. Any club he's been at has been a bit of a slow burn. You look at Ipswich, he had been a great place, but it wasn't an overnight job. So you'd have to be patient with Mick McCarthy, but he does recruit very well, and you saw that at Wolves. He turned fairly, I don't like using the term mediocre. Let's just say that average players and got the best out of them. And I think that's probably what Cardiff need. And Cardiff have got that. They've got some good players, but I think he can maybe take them on a bit more. So of them, I think Mick McCarthy would be the best shout. I do think that it wouldn't surprise me if Tony Pulis is still in and around there because they are suited to him. It would be an instant fix with him in the sense of his style of play, his style of players. I don't think it should work. I don't think he should go there. I think they'd be better off with Mick McCarthy personally. But I wouldn't hang my hat on Tony Pulis not necessarily getting this.
Yeah, that's a fair judgment. I'll give you that. And I know you were going to be favourable towards Mick McCarthy anyway, so I'm not surprised by that. However, Craig, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to put one small caveat in there because the joint 8th favourite for the job is Nathan Jones. Could it happen again? Just for a bit of fun as a Luton fan for you.
Surely not.
Oh, we can't go through this again. I'm being honest. I generally think Nathan Jones will want to still be the Luton manager once Luton arrive in Power Court, the new stadium. So let's rule him out. The obvious one has to be Paul Cook. I think they kind of need to change their style a little bit. They had it for the last 2 previous managers. It's worked to a certain degree. Now it's gone. I think they need to change their way a little bit. I don't think why Mark Hughes? I know it's a Wales connection, but God, no. Mick McCarthy's a good shout. I know he's just recently left Applewell, Nicosia. Mick McCarthy probably gets someone like keeping more playing, like scoring for fun. So I want Paul Cook. Danny Cowley, I think it'd be a bit too much for him.
Fair enough. I want to come back to you, Charlie. We'll talk one more question about the favourites up here. Because obviously Craig Bellamy's a natural link for a managerial job. Lee Bowyer's in there from Charlton. Obviously, they've had their problems off the pitch continuing this season. And one name I'm worried about a bit further down, or I'm interested in, I should say, and I know he played a lot of games for Swansea, but he's since managed Wales very successfully, and he's currently out of work, and that man is Chris Coleman. Now, again, taking another job might have caused him some trouble in terms of Sunderland, but I kind of see that early on and think there's a name that could work.
I'll be honest, I think he'd be a very good shout. I wouldn't have even, if you asked me to draw a short list, obviously I'm not a recruitment expert, I probably wouldn't have put him on there. He sort of, after the whole Sunderland and then Wales thing, sort of disappeared a little bit, and actually probably a bit of a forgotten man. But he's been very successful where he's been. And from a footballing perspective, though, I think you could do a lot worse. Similar to Mick McCarthy, he gets the best out of players. I don't think a team of superstars is what he's suited to. But I think he would do well with these. And I know what you're saying about Paul Cook, but Paul Cook would have to do a massive overhaul to get Cardiff to fit his style of play. Whether they'd give him the patience to do that, as we've just seen with Neil Harris, 6 losses and you're out in your ear. I don't know if that would be. I love Paul Cook as a manager, but I don't know if it's the best fit personally. Chris Coleman, him or Mick McCarthy would probably be good. Both very similar managers, both play a similar style of football, and probably better suited to Cardiff and less of an upheaval to get them higher up the league, in my opinion.
And Craig, because I know that I may get slated from Cardiff fans for suggesting a Swansea boy, the only other Welshman on there that's interesting me, who's currently in work, is Michael Flynn at Newport, flying in League Two, so many cup runs over the years. A good young manager, not really a connection to Cardiff or Swansea. My final sort of wildcard throw out there, would he potentially be a candidate?
Michael Flynn, I think, don't get me wrong, he's done a fantastic job with Newport over the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, great cup runs, obviously doing very well with Newport in the league at the moment. But I generally do think it'll be a step too much for him at the moment. I think it'd be a bad move. I think it'd be similar to like a Nathan Jones moving to Stoke sort of situation with Michael Flynn. And I'd be pleased with what he's doing at Newport, getting them up into League One. But yeah, I don't see Michael Flynn being at Cardiff. Regarding Chris Coleman, with him at Sunderland, it was a poison chalice anyway. I think Chris Coleman with Cardiff, it could be a fresh start. I know you get the Swansea allegiance and that stuff, but it could be a good move for Cardiff, to be honest. And obviously, he's been to the stadium many times. He obviously managed Wales in that stadium, so it's not like he's a Swansea boy. He's been in the stadium so many times, so it doesn't make it doesn't make any difference. It's not a bad shout actually having Chris Coleman, but you never know with Cardiff. You could get some random manager like Odegaard and Solskjaer taking over, so you don't know.
To be fair, since Cardiff, he's worked out all right. But I'm glad to see that we're largely in agreement with the top 2 candidates, but the few below perhaps not quite so appealing. But the final question, lads, that we normally ask, you've said who you'd like the next man to be. You've said some of the names that you think it could be. But we've got to talk about Cardiff for the rest of the season. Charlie has got the easy answer to this one because he had them not to be in the playoffs or the relegation battle. So with them 9 points away from relegation, 10 points away from the playoffs, I presume the safest bet for you is to see it in the same way.
Yeah, I can't see them. I can't see them making a late run for it. And I'll tell you why, for 2 reasons really quickly. Firstly, I don't think they've got no new appointment lined up, so you're going to lose a few days to that. And then whoever comes in, I just don't think they've got enough time to get a decent window of recruitment to overhaul some of the things that have been their weaknesses this season. So for me, I think it's a time issue. Over the summer, whoever comes in, we could talk about that then. I don't think they've got enough time to recruit effectively to fire them up the league and try and plug those gaps that they've got. So for me, mid-table, probably a little bit higher than where they are now, but I'd say no higher than 10th, 11th, something like that.
And Craig, you had them to finish in the playoffs like myself, but they weren't in too dissimilar a position last season when Neil Harris took charge. Maybe slightly better off, but can you see a late playoff charge if the right man comes in?
No, to be honest, I think Harris had a bit more time. I think Warnock got the sack in October of 2019. So obviously Harris had a bit more time, more of a transfer window, obviously in January. I'm going to have to agree with Charlie. I don't think they will make the playoffs. I think mid-table will probably be about right. Lee Tomlin doesn't even know who's the manager at the moment. So probably mid-table, I don't expect anything else.
Yeah, you make a good point. Something that we probably haven't got time to discuss, but the fact one of the players came out on social media and said we didn't even know this was happening is a slight concern for another day. Right, final words, lads, and it's going to be a 2-word answer for each of you. You've said who you'd like the manager to be. You've said who you think it will be. In 2 words, Charlie Betts, who is going to be the next manager of Cardiff City Football Club?
Mick McCarthy.
Craig?
Paul Cook.
I am going to say Craig Bellamy.
3 different answers.
A lot to discuss, a lot of possibilities, and probably the longest list of managers under 20-1 I've seen for quite a while for a championship job. We've given our thoughts. We've discussed some potentially controversial names as well as some of the early favourites. Let us know in the comments down below, Cardiff fans, who would you like it to be and who do you think it will be? If you haven't already, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Let us know your thoughts on the season so far. Subscribe to the channel for regular manager specials every time they crop up at this level, as well as matchday championship predictions every single week on the channel. And there's plenty more, including player interviews as well. But a big thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.